Does it have, so I know part of the problem with Ethereum is the gas fees. Does it have cheaper gas fees? Is it even called gas fees on the Lightning Network? These are all words I don't know.
Yeah, it's not called gas fees. The transaction fees are like near zero on the Lightning Network. Very small, very minuscule. You know, again, how we talked about the warehouse function where we abstracted gold into paper, and that worked as long as you could redeem the paper for gold. Lightning Network is sort of similar, but you always have the option to redeem. No one can suspend your option to redeem it for Bitcoin. So it's this layer that it's almost like a hyper liquid layer that lets you move Bitcoin very fast, very cheap. You can basically settle anywhere in the world with finality instantly. And then, you know, when you're done, you just redeem for Bitcoin. So you're funding a channel, a Lightning channel to transact, and then you're redeeming that channel back into Bitcoin to settle.
So what happens if a bunch of these people who hold a bunch of Bitcoin end up switching it back into fiat, wanting to buy things?
This is the market process of Bitcoin. So if people that hold Bitcoin want fiat, they can sell, they could trade Bitcoin for fiat. People do this every day. Bitcoin's got, I think its daily volume is around $8 to $10 billion a day. I mean, it's very liquid. It's global. It's $1 trillion asset. And again, the other option is people can borrow against it. The lending market in Bitcoin is becoming quite mature, where because Bitcoin is this 24/7 asset, it's a bearer asset. So when I send it to you, it's as if I sent you a gold coin. It's unencumbered. Just by possessing it, that means you own it. Essentially, you don't need to do a title search or anything like that on Bitcoin. So it's kind of the ultimate or pristine collateral in a way that you can just send this digital bearer asset to a lender, and they'll, you know, say you send them $100,000 in Bitcoin, they'll loan you 50,000 or 30,000, depending on your loan to value ratio. And that's another way to get liquidity. And a lot of people opt for that, so you can maintain your Bitcoin holdings without having to sell it, but still get liquidity in fiat for spending.
That's interesting. I didn't know you could do that. What do you have to pay for that?
I mean, there's different companies that have different rates. You know, there's a big company in the US called NYDIG that does a lot of this for institutions, high net worth individuals. You'd have to check with them on their rates. I would just ballpark it around 8 to 12% a year.
Okay. Wow. I have no idea what to think. I have no idea what to think. What do you think is going to happen with inflation, given how rapidly you said 40% of everything was printed in the last 18 months?
Every dollar in existence, 4 out of 10.
Every dollar in existence. Is that just in America? That's in existence?
That's in existence, yeah. So
what? Who's doing this? Is that just Americans?
Well, this is the Federal Reserve. This is quantitative easing. Every time you hear quantitative easing, the debt ceiling, printing money, all of these euphemisms just mean they're expanding the money supply. And when they're expanding the money supply, you can translate this in your mind to they're stealing property from people, or they're stealing time from people. And this isn't even an opinion, frankly. You can look at it mechanically, and I don't think there's any other way to evaluate it. So a couple of ways to think about this. One would be, again, money is just pure marketability, right? It doesn't have any value except what it can be traded for. So if there's one group of people that can print money that everyone else is forced to use, they're able to confiscate property and value from those people that are being forced to use it. And that's what inflation is, right? Essentially. So it's been wrapped in all these different academic jargons, like it's useful and necessary for a healthy economy, but it's just not true. Another way to think about.
Why did that come around? Sorry to interrupt. But how did people convince other people that inflation was necessary and a good thing?
Well, when you own the money printer, you tend to gain disproportionate leverage in academia. You could look at the entire emergence of Keynesian economics versus Austrian economics. And this is the big divide between central banking and Bitcoiners. Austrian economics was the cumulative knowledge of humanity in the sphere of economics throughout all of history, basically. And then when central banking emerged in earnest, this alternative branch of economics called Keynesian economics, largely under a guy named John Maynard Keynes, emerged as an alternative view of economic reality that really just justified monopolizing money, frankly. And if you look at, and this is all they teach in college, by the way. Again, I have a master's degree in accounting and finance. They didn't teach me one letter of Austrian economics, zero, zilch. But I learned plenty of Keynesian economics. And in Keynesian economics, you're taught that essentially the government is God. They're like literally, it's the top of the page in the textbook. It issues money into circulation and takes money out of circulation. There's no consideration of the government as a human organization. Like they don't suffer any trade-offs. They have perfect knowledge. There's no politics. It's just this perfect institution.
Accurate representation of the government. Yeah.
Yes. And as we all know, that's completely ludicrous, frankly.
Yeah.
So that's how it emerged. I mean, I don't want to get into this argument. People are like, oh, no, that's not true. They didn't mean to do that. People always want to argue with me about the intentions. People think like central bankers are really trying to do a good job. And I'm agnostic, actually, to their intentions, because it's like, it doesn't matter if you're trying to do a good job or not. The mechanical design of the central bank is they're running a pyramid scheme. Fiat currency is a pyramid scheme. So it's those with access to the newly printed money first get rich at the expense of those who get it latest and last. So if you just look at the operating mechanics of fiat currency, it's a really bad deal for everyone unless you have access to that new liquidity first. So how did we get here? I think just unchecked human greed. It's one of the ways I like to describe the free market is it's the collective expression of the logos, actually. So whenever we're buying and selling, we're effectively voting. So when you buy a car, you're telling the market to make more cars. You sell a house, you're telling the market to make less houses. When you corrupt the medium through which those preferences are expressed, the buying and selling, which is money, then you are distorting the economic democracy of the free market. And all of a sudden, if the Fed is printing money and buying the shares of this company, that's not because the company was demanded by market actors. It's not like it was doing something useful and people wanted that, more shares in that company to be bought. It's because bureaucrats decided in a backroom deal that they're going to print money and go buy shares of this company, whether or not it's producing any economic benefit. So you move
Renewable
away.
energy companies.
Yeah, exactly. So you move. It's distorting the collective logos, and this is like a key point where I think we today think that democracy, state democracy, is like the ultimate form of governance. But I would argue that the free market perfects what state democracy approximates. We think one person, one vote is the right degree of fairness, but that gets distorted in all these different ways. The real, true, pure democracy is the free market itself with honest, undistorted money. Thanks to man's greedy ways and very inventive machinations, he found a way to basically get a perpetual free lunch by monopolizing money. And this is, again, what every government throughout history has done. It's always like control the money to control the people. So that's where we're at.
And you don't think there's any way that the government's going to be able to regulate Bitcoin? Like, what about if you're trying to, I can't remember where I was, where you could potentially buy property with Bitcoin. I'm sure that's popping up in areas. And then isn't that going to have to be taxed in some way in order for governments to allow Bitcoin to exist? And hasn't China tried to ban it a bunch of times?
Yeah, China's banned Bitcoin multiple times. I guess the key point is this, that regulation on Bitcoin is ultimately ineffective. You're not going to be able to change any of the rules of Bitcoin by passing a rule in the jurisdictional world. So what they can regulate are the endpoints. So, if you're trading it for real estate or anything to buy shares in a company, governments are very good at regulating centralized entities, institutions, physical land, but they're very poor at dealing with decentralized institutions or entities, which that's basically what Bitcoin is, a decentralized business. So I actually look at it the opposite way, that I think in the same way gold was a regulator of government historically, and that's largely why governments had to devise such an intelligent way to co-opt gold, because gold was holding them accountable, right? They couldn't be irresponsible with money because gold would leave their country, and this forced them to get very creative in how they control the market for gold. I think Bitcoin will provide a similar function in that it will actually be a regulator of government. So if you're overly tyrannizing your people, or you're overly inflating or whatever, people are just going to move their wealth into Bitcoin and leave to the country where they're treated best. The more dollars you print, the more inflation you create. Inflation is just a tax. They're just stealing wealth from you, full stop. There's nothing else to it. People, market actors, are voluntarily going to figure out, okay, you're taxing me, you're stealing from me. I want to put my money somewhere that can't be inflated or taxed as easily, which is Bitcoin. And then they have this whole world of options open up to them, which is you have this hypermobile, globally liquid capital. You can go anywhere in the world. So I think Bitcoin causes government to shrink over time dramatically.
Do you think that's only possible for people who are smarter though? Because like Bitcoin is kind of difficult to figure out if you have no idea what it is even. It's a completely different concept. It's been difficult for me to wrap my head around it, but I think I've wrapped my head around it. And then getting up and moving to a different country, that requires a type of person, a super open individual. And you have to have some money in order to do that. So aren't we talking about the tiniest percentage of the population? Or do you think that's just going to grow?
In the beginning, yes. And I think that's what you're seeing today. There's a small minority of people that tend to be disagreeable, libertarian-minded, independent thinking, curious. Yeah, there's a number of other traits I'm sure we could put there, but open. That have gone into Bitcoin, that have gone into Bitcoin first. But over time, I don't think, here's the one constant, I guess you could say, in statism is they're not going to stop printing money. They have to keep printing more money to actually service prior debts that they've accumulated. So, Social Security, Medicare, all these things, there's tons of unfunded liabilities, and they have to print money to service those. So the more dollars they print, the more demand they create for unprintable money, which is Bitcoin. So I think people get forced into this over time. And then you're talking about disrupting the revenue model for states. Direct taxation and inflation are kind of the two revenue models. Inflation effectively goes away in a Bitcoin world. And then taxation becomes much more difficult to impose because the citizen has a lot of negotiating leverage. If you want to, just send me a bill and tell me what my tax rate is, well, maybe I leave your country and maybe I decide I don't want to participate in your regime anymore. It's pulling governments into more of a free market competition over citizens, actually. And so when governments compete, citizens win. We'll get lower prices, better services, more innovation, all these things the free market provides that the government has restricted itself from through the monopolization of money.
Where are you located, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm in Hawaii currently.
Okay, so you're still in the US then. You haven't hopped down to like Puerto Rico or something.
I hopped out for a bit, but I'm back. I feel good kind of in the place I'm in Hawaii now. I've got 1 foot out and 1 foot in, it feels like.
That's fair. I just moved out of Canada. So you bringing up the government taking all of my money and yeah, I feel that.
You moved to Nashville, right?
Yes.
I'm from Tennessee originally. So Nashville, it's an amazing city.
It's wonderful. I love it. It's full of allergens, but it's better than being full of, I'll probably just end that sentence there instead of being true. But I like it. It's fun. Do I have other questions for you? I don't know what to think about this whole thing. I think probably just having money in other things that aren't the US dollar at the moment. is a good idea. How do you feel about other cryptocurrencies like Ethereum or any of the other, tokens or coins that are around?
Yeah, I don't think there's a market proven use case for anything in the crypto universe except Bitcoin. I'm not saying that there can't be at some point. My general advice is that Bitcoin is money. It is the internet of money or the digital gold. There's all these analogies that partially describe it. Everything else I describe as liquid venture capital. So
yeah, okay.
Could be something, but there's probably, 99% will fail.
Okay. That makes sense. Where can people find you online if they'd like to find you online, learn more about Bitcoin, what you do?
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter at breedlove22, which is my last name, BREEDLOVE22. You can also find me, there's links to everything there, but the show is called The What Is Money Show. And we're at whatismoneyshowpodcast.com, I think, or you can find us on YouTube.
Okay. I'll link all those below. Thank you very much for coming on. That was fun.
Thanks, Michaela. Thanks for having me.